Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. The Knife Raven here, back again with another video. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing something that I think will be a fairly helpful video for some people who are a bit newer to the knife world. And that is, I'm going to be talking about my top 3 budget knives. Now, I'm sure you've seen other videos that have talked about budget knives, and probably people have done their top 3, top 5, top 10. So I'm not original in this, but I figured, because I haven't yet done my top 3, I figured, you know what? I don't have any other reviews to do at the moment, so I think I'll go right ahead and do a ranking video, so to speak. Now, these aren't going to be in any... Well, I shouldn't say they aren't going to be in particular order, because they will be. But these 3 knives have been some of my all-time favorites, and are knives I would recommend to almost anyone. And yeah, I'm very much recommending these at as low of a price point as I can. I'm trying to go with the under 30 Canadian, which is, when you think about it, if you want an actually good knife, that is still fairly budget-friendly. And I know everyone will have a different budget, but that's what I'm going to be going for today. So without further ado, I'm going to be taking a look at my first of 3 knives for the best budget choice. And the first is the Higonokami. Now, I have recently talked about this knife a fair bit. In fact, I recently got it about a month or so ago, and I spoke rather highly of it, and there's no surprise as to why that is. This is a very nice, slim knife for carry. It's fairly small. You can see that it is quite thin. The mechanism is extremely simple. It's a friction folder. And the steel used on it is SK5 carbon steel, which is a fairly nice utility steel. It's nothing terribly fancy, but it's far from poor. It takes a nice edge, and this knife has stayed razor sharp even after a little bit of use, and I haven't needed to sharpen it. So you're looking at 22 Canadian dollars for this knife, and you can get them in different shapes and sizes, which will either increase or decrease the price. If you want them in brass, which is kind of the more traditional material, brass will cost you a little bit more, probably about $5 at least. And the sizes, I believe this is the model number 3, although you can feel free to correct me if you believe I am incorrect there. And they have different sizes for different tasks. I know the larger models can go all the way up to, I believe, 8 inches and 9 inches open. So very much heavy-duty style, whereas the smallest one only measures about this big with, I'd say, about an inch long blade. So you can get these in varying sizes, materials. You can get special limited editions with embellishments on the handles. You can get them in higher quality steels, the more expensive steels. But for the basic small-sized Higo with the simple SK5 blade, just a sturdy carbon steel handle, nothing too fancy on it, this will run you 22 Canadian. And as long as you've got some oil handy, which is an absolute necessity with this knife. For example, this is the blade oil I used. I've never actually shown the bottle. This is Kent of Inglewood's brand, and this is camellia blade oil. Now, camellia is a seed, I believe, and it is food safe, so that's one huge advantage to it. You don't have to worry about having anything be put in your food if you're using your knives for kitchen use, and it's safe. I don't believe there are any downsides to it. It works very well at preventing rust and corrosion, or halting patina, and as you can probably see here, I have a whole lot of it on the handle, because the handle itself is carbon steel, which means that it too has the possibility of rust. So as long as you've got a nice quality oil, say just mineral oil will do, you can keep these knives in great shape. You don't have to worry about rust, and they will function very well. Also, if your pivot is too loose, I've heard some of these are a bit loose, you can just tap it with a hammer or mallet, and that will tighten up the mechanism to an appropriate level of strength. So yes, very simple design. It's been around for over 100 years. Used to be a implement for Japanese schools. It's a traditional knife that apparently has its roots dating to the tanto, which of course is similar to a small version of the katana. So this knife has its history that dates all the way back to swords of old, which is quite interesting, and these are still made entirely by hand. The blade with the tang is still forged instead of stamped, so very nice quality, very simple design, and very affordable. So that's the Higo. That's my first of the three. My second choice for my top budget knife should be no surprise to my long-term viewers, and that is the Opinel of France. This particular model is the number 9. I chose this simply because I haven't really shown off the number 9 in a while. I often have a number 6, but really the size you're going with doesn't matter. They all have a similar price point. The larger the size, they go up about $1 per size up, and you can kind of figure, at least in Canadian dollar standards, the price goes something like $10 plus whatever the number is. So if it's a number 6, it would be $16. This one would be about $19. And I got this one at House of Knives, another frequently seen blade store, at least here in Canada. The handle is made out of a nice single piece of beechwood. Very sturdy and solid. It doesn't feel like it's unnecessarily weak or dry. Again, a bit of mineral oil goes a long way. It has a nice sheen to it. The blade here, which has taken a very nice patina with aid of coffee. This is a XC90 carbon steel blade. And XC90 steel is, from what I have gathered by using these knives and reading how other people have used these knives, the steel is fairly hard. Edge retention is, again, not the greatest. It's no super steel, but it sharpens up very, very quickly and will take an extremely sharp edge. And Opinel knives are famous for having a scary thin blade. You can see that this is a very, very slicey blade and makes for a great picnic knife for, say, cutting some salami or cheese. Of course, the Opinel is a traditional knife also. It's been around since the 1890s, I believe, and the company has since moved to a larger factory so that these can be made in larger batches, much quicker. And you can get them, of course, in other handles too. However, things like olive, walnut, paduk, oak, ebony, these all cost more as they are slightly more exotic. And also you can get these in 12C27 Sandvik stainless. This particular model is arguably the most traditional, featuring a beechwood handle and a carbon steel blade. The most traditional size is the number 8. Again, this is the number 9, just slightly bigger. Although you can get these ranging all the way from number 2 to number 13. 13 is about the size of a folding machete, whereas the number 2 is about the size of a keychain knife, similar to the Higo number 1, with a 1-inch blade. As for legality, unlike the Higo, which is a friction folder, which should be legal in almost all places, this is a ring lock. It is also known as a virole, I believe, and this particular lock would make it illegal to carry without a good reason in the UK. I don't know about other parts of the world, but if lock knives are allowed in any way, shape, or form, this should be okay. Again, I'm no lawyer. Please check your local laws. Don't rely on me to give you advice. But again, this is a very traditional knife, very inexpensive, features a nice carbon blade, very nice construction, extremely comfortable in the hand, has much more presence to it than the Higo. As you can see, the Opinel's far larger handle, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. The Higo is easier to carry, as it's thinner, but the Opinel feels a lot more sturdy and secure in the hand. Also, the difference between the reverse tanto and the clip point or yataghan style blade shape. Now, on to my third and final, and also number one favorite budget knife that I would recommend to absolutely anyone. A knife that may be surprising to some, whereas others will be rolling their eyes because they know I have talked about this knife a lot. But my absolute favorite budget knife as of now, I may update this list later if I find anything better, that I would recommend to anyone is from Sheffield, England, and it is this, the Arthur Wright & Sons Ettrick. Now the Ettrick, this is an incredibly interesting knife. The history dates back to the mid-1800s, where Lord Wharncliffe and his gamekeeper first invented this blade shape. And of course it has been since known as the Wharncliffe. The very first Wharncliffe looked somewhat like this, and the name of the heavily exaggerated swayback handle has since been known as the Ettrick, I believe, in reference to the Ettrick Valley. The handle, while very unconventional in its design, is very comfortable, featuring a nice four-finger grip for almost any hand size, and again, the unsharpened part of the blade means that no matter how large your hand is, you should have a fairly good grip on this knife. Also in the reverse grip, which is favored by whittlers and woodcarvers, this is still a very excellent and very comfortable knife to hold. Unlike the other two, which have no springs or real mechanisms except for the locking ring on the openl, this is a slip joint, which means it has a spring that allows the knife to be kept open. And with a little bit of force, you can overpower the spring and thus close the knife. It's not a safety feature necessarily, as it can still close on you. It is, however, much more secure than, say, that of the Higo, where the only real safety is keeping your hand on the extended tang and just hoping that it doesn't close. So, being a slip joint and having a blade of under 3 inches, way under 3 inches, this is easily the shortest blade here, this is legal almost anywhere. As long as you're allowed to carry a folding knife, this should be legal. Again, extremely short blade, no locking mechanism whatsoever. And even if it is or isn't legal, this is definitely the kind of knife that would not invoke any form of paranoia or fear. It definitely looks like a very friendly design. It's far from aggressive by any means. And its history and old school appeal, I could see being very attractive to some. The C70 carbon steel blade, which, while again not the hardest, is certainly far from poor. It has not the best edge retention, but can take an edge with minimal difficulty, and the edge that it can have can end up being very sharp at the end of the day, provided the sharpener knows what they're doing. The bolsters are made of nickel silver, the liners are brass, and the pins are also brass. The handle here is rosewood, and it's a very pretty hardwood with a very nice grain. Originally, its color was a lot closer to this, but after, again, a nice bit of oiling, the wood grain truly produced itself and is now absolutely gorgeous. Again, the camera can't pick it up to its full sheen, but this is just a simply beautiful handle. It's easily the most attractive of the three knives in my personal opinion. And again, the design is very comfortable to hold, very simple, but well done. The quality and fit and finish on this is also probably the highest among the three. And this is easily the probably the least known of these three knives. The Opinel is very famous, and the Higo has its fair share of popularity, but Arthur Wright & Son is a brand that was established right after the Second World War, and unfortunately, or pardon me, I believe right before the Second World War, and their company almost fell apart, but it was bought by Ashley and Michael Harrison, who have started making changes and improving the quality and workmanship. And I believe they have a couple other people working with them, but now Arthur Wright has become one of the leading contenders for Sheffield cutlery and is now bringing back the traditions that were once so famous and made the city known as the City of Steel. And the Ettrick, again, is a very traditional pattern and is very appealing to carry. It makes for a great knife and overall a good whittling knife too. Again, the concerns about the steel, all these steels are within the same ballpark of inexpensive, fair quality, and while not super steel, they are certainly far from bad. Now the punchline. Why am I recommending this? And especially considering this knife would have the most effort put into it, why exactly is this my number one? How cheap is it? Well, this knife only cost $14.95 GBP. Now, GBP again, that would translate probably for my US viewers to about 17 US dollars, 18 maybe. And for me, and for my other Canadian viewers, that would probably be just around the $20 mark, maybe a little bit over, maybe a little bit under. And these knives are all very, very close. They're just sitting around the $20 price range, way less than 30, but a bit more than 15. And despite having probably the most workmanship put into it, the Ettrick is still able to keep a ridiculously cheap price range. Now granted, where I bought it has since sold out. This was purchased at Heine Haynes, which is a very well-known UK knife dealer. And unfortunately, I believe this has gone up to, 17 now. I think that they upped the price a little bit, but that still doesn't take away the fact that this is still way under 30 Canadian and still is a brilliantly made knife with lots of history, very good fit and finish, a nice strong spring, an appealing design, and is just overall exemplary for your day-to-day tasks. It might be considered too small for some, but this would be more than enough to trim a thread or open a package. It can do all the things that the Higo, or even to a lesser degree, the Opinel can do. Now, admittedly, all three of these knives have different places. This is kind of a small gentleman's pocket knife. Higo would be more of a utility knife, almost akin to a box cutter. And the Opinel could definitely be seen as more of a tough use, outdoors purpose knife. But again, despite this, they would all make great pocket knives, and the selection of materials and steels you can choose from is very good. That's the only downside with the Ettrick. The only steel offered is C70, whereas with the Opinel you can choose carbon or stainless. You can choose different types of carbon steel for the Higo, and I believe some tool steel, perhaps. And again, you have your limited editions in different sizes, so that's the only real downside with the Ettrick. Only one size and one steel. You can, however, cycle out the handle materials for, say, ebony, stag, buffalo, or bog oak, which is perhaps my favorite. Now, the takeaway from this is that I am heavily biased, and I really like this knife. I think it's absolutely a knife that every collector should have, even if not to carry, but just to add to their collection. It's immensely unique, and I will not stop advocating for this knife. It is still one of my all-time favorites, and I think that the quality that you're getting for such a small price is absolutely worth it. But even though I would recommend this as my number one pick for budget-friendly, traditional-style knives, I would still recommend these two almost as much. I mean, the Higo is still a brilliant knife for everyday carry and everyday use that you don't have to worry about losing or scratching. It's definitely a knife meant to take a beating. And the Opinel is practically indestructible as long as you don't, misuse it and use it as a pry bar and break the blade. But for most conventional pocket knife uses, this is more than adequate. But again, these are all wonderful knives. I love them all. You've got made in France, made in Japan, made in Sheffield, and while they are all carbon steel, these particular examples, again, you can cycle up for stainless on the Opinel and Higo. But all in all, to take away, yes, I've managed to ramble for 20 minutes. I'm very good at it. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope that this video has been helpful to at least someone. I think that new people in the knife community, they often make some mistakes and look for the wrong kinds of knives. And while there is technically no wrong kind of knife, because it's all up to the individual, I certainly, in my early days, I went ahead and purchased some low-quality pieces that are far from anything that I would carry today. And one could say it's just that I was less snobby back then. But even now, these are all peasants' knives. These aren't extremely high-end custom pieces. These are still very humble knives, and I would still absolutely recommend them. So, you can call me a pretentious, snobby collector all you want. I will agree with you. But that does not change that these knives are time-tested, and they work even today in our age of tactical, carbon fiber Damascus with a black wash blade, assisted opening, thumb stud knives. Even though we exist in an age where that is considered the norm, I still advocate for knives like this. And for a beginner who's just getting introduced to the knife community, I truly hope that you can test out at least one or two of these, and I hope you enjoy them just as much as I have. And even if you do move on to the modern, expensive Benchmades and Spydercos, or maybe a custom traditional, it doesn't matter. I do think that no matter what kind of knife collector you are, you should at least try out some of these knives, as they're a good place to start, and a good place to begin your journey. So thank you very much for watching. I will leave links in the description for those interested in buying any of these. And again, thank you very much for watching. This has been my top 3 budget traditional knives as of now, and this is the Knife Raven, as always, signing off. Goodbye.